Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Welcome to the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today our guest is Shane Bigelow from Champ Titles. Welcome.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Hey, let's talk titles.
All right.
Why is the speed of titling so important when you're in an environment like for a dealership or somebody who's moving cars across the country?
Whenever I get a question like this, I always have to put myself in the position of the dealer. And if I'm the dealer principal, or the head of sales, what I'm realizing is that the faster I can bring a car in, get it in inventory, and then get it out of inventory with a really positive customer experience, because I know I'll maintain their loyalty if I have that, that's a win. That's a high profit win for me. Well, titling can mess all of that up. If you buy a car and you put it in your inventory, but you didn't properly title it into your name as a dealer, and you just hope and pray that when you sell it to someone that the titling is going to work out, it's a recipe for a CSI score disaster where your customer's not happy, the paperwork's not going, and as a result, you wind up sitting on what we call dead inventory that costs you a lot of money. So titling used to be this back office thing that nobody thought about, but now it really is coming to the forefront as dealers do more and more volume around the country.
Now, what causes the headaches in titling? Like what are some of the reasons why that would affect a customer's experience?
Well, in this country, we've got 51 disparate systems. There's all the states plus Washington, D.C. So if you're buying inventory from different parts of the country or you're getting it from auction, that car could have come from literally anywhere. So gone are the days where dealers are only acquiring inventory from walk-in or trade-in business. They're now getting it from wherever they believe they can source it at the best price. Well, with that comes all of these 51 different disparate systems, and so the paperwork is often not accurate. It's not up to date. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's still physical paper as opposed to a digital version of a title, which is, I think, where the industry is going. So when dealers have to get that paper in, they're trusting that the piece of paper is accurate. Unfortunately, it may not be. That leads to a lot of customer distress on the back end when the customer wants to know that they fully own the car that they just paid for. So eliminating that paperwork and making the process digital and enhancing the way states approve of title transfers is what we do as a company. But the problem for the dealers is that if the system isn't built well across state borders, they're going to be stuck with, again, that dead inventory. And there's a way to solve that now with interstate 50-state titling.
Let's talk about that. If a dealer has, like you mentioned, kind of a nationwide vehicle acquisition strategy for their business, what type of support do they need, for titling? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So it used to be that they'd need knowledgeable subject matter experts sitting inside of their dealerships, being able to know how to transact in every state where they had a physical presence. Well, now that's even more complicated. They need to know how to transact in any state because of the way inventory is being acquired. But that's a perfect way for technology to improve the efficiency of a dealership and improve the efficiency of the title clerk. Technology is now available specifically from one state that offers up this 50-state solution to title clerks everywhere. And now bigger and bigger dealerships and larger mega dealers are using this technology in order to improve the efficiency of their buying center. And I'll give you an example. If you're a dealer, and let's say you had a one rooftop dealership, so you were relatively small, and you wanted to acquire inventory 5 states away, that used to be really complex with shipping and the paperwork and knowing how to acquire an out-of-state title. Now, with what's called the National Digital Titling Clearinghouse that's offered through West Virginia, that dealer can simply go online and acquire that title into their name using the NDTC, for the acronym for short for the National Digital Titling Clearinghouse, get it in their name, and probably before that car even shows up in inventory on their lot, that title is theirs, and they know for certain that it's their car to sell. So when they go to sell it, they'll have no problem selling that vehicle. And this is even more interesting for dealers that are using unique, or I suppose the most innovative ways to store inventory. Many dealers today are buying cars and not shipping them to their physical stores. They're storing them off-site and simply advertising them online. Well, in order to do that, you need to make sure you own that car, and that's why the NDTC matters so much to dealers that are thinking bigger and in more innovative ways.
I mean, it sounds like you had brought up, at the beginning of the interview, that the problems that could affect customers, experience, would be, I come to you, I buy a car from you, and now there's uncertainty whether I own the car or it takes a long time for the titling. But if the dealer does do it at the very start, and at that point they've just completely eliminated the possibility of that problem before the vehicle even arrives at the store.
That's exactly right. It's so much cheaper for the dealer to simply put the car into their name when they acquire it than to know that they might have all of these operational issues on the back end. And it's almost always the same story. My business partner was a mega dealer, and so we would always ask other dealers, we say, do you have a titling problem? And they'd say, no, absolutely not. And we'd say, well, can we bring your title clerks in here and talk to them? Of course, the title clerks come in and they'll tell you for hours about all the titling problems they have. So the dealer principal often doesn't realize that there's a very easy $40 fix for this whole thing. Just simply get the title into your name, and then you know that you will never have a problem when you go to sell it. And that's a business practice that is new to the industry. It's really only the last few years that this has started to take hold, as buying centers became a bigger solution for dealers to acquire inventory, and national buying became sort of the standard, right? You see platforms that are out there for auctions that now no one cares what the car is. They care what the car is. Is it filling the spot in the inventory we need? Can we get that car in and flip it fast? That's what the NDTC enables a dealer to do.
We've touched on the customer's experience, but I imagine there's even a massive ripple effect across, your retail strategy, your floor plan, and other parts of the dealership. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other problems that this would resolve for a dealer?
Yeah. So again, going back to the experience of that dealer principal, at no place on your P&L is there something that says title expense. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to get to the root of what bad titling can cost you, you have to look at, what if I hold that car in inventory longer because I don't have the title in my name? Well, that's additional floor plan expense, or cash outlay if it was a used car sitting in inventory. What if I have an operational issue, or I've got to FedEx documents back and forth with my customers and hope that they sign it correctly and hope that works? Well, now I'm paying mailing and storage and printing costs. Well, what is this doing to my customer satisfaction scores? Of course the customer is not going to be satisfied if they purchase the vehicle and they're doing paperwork that they regard as your problem as the dealer and not their problem. Yeah. Then their customer satisfaction goes down. They're less likely to give you the service business or enhance their F&I relationship with the dealership. So how do you really quantify the full cost of bad titling? You have to add all of that together. And good titling, again, fixed for $40 on the front end, eliminates all of that risk. And it's taken years, I think, for us to sort of beat this drum and help dealers understand that this is the solution, but this is the solution, and big dealers are starting to figure it out.
So let's flip that coin. We kind of talked about the problem. Let's talk about the benefits that come with the solution. So if dealers embrace faster titling and they start solving their titling issues right up front when they acquire the vehicle, what does that do to their profitability, and what does it do for a big dealer group at scale?
Well, there's a great book called Good to Great by a fellow named Jim Collins, and this can apply to any business. And his basic concept is you have to figure out at the root of what you're doing, what is your core economic principle that guides your business? Mm-hmm. Well, for most dealers, the core economic principle is profit per vehicle or profit per customer relationship. And so if you're looking at your real full relationship with that underlying customer or underlying vehicle, you have to start counting in all of the expenses you incur to buy that vehicle, get it into your inventory, pay for it in cash or get a loan on your floor plan to have it, hold it in inventory, manage it, clean it, service it, and then ultimately sell it. And when you sell it, what does that do to your customer service index? If you're not taking into account every which way that you are driving profit per vehicle or profit per relationship, you're really not able to compete with the largest dealers who are doing this. And so any dealer of any size can now look at all of those components and say, well, how do I drive inventory faster? The easiest way is to make the process from the paperwork side as fluid and easy as possible. And you'd think, well, why would I want to pay as a dealer to get the title in my name up front? That seems like an additional expense until you look at all the knock-on effects of not doing it. All of the extra days of carrying that inventory, all of the customer service issues, all of the paperwork back and forth. If you simply fix that problem up front, now you know I can buy inventory confidently from anywhere in the country, from any source. If I want to get it from consumers online who are just simply going to my website and typing in their VIN and I'm making them an offer. If I want to buy it from an auction, if I want to buy it from a physical auction, a digital auction, if I want to get it because I had walk-in business, or maybe, and I've just seen this recently and I'm blown away by it, what about the concept of remote vehicle acquisition centers where someone drives through one of those big scanning machines and a dealer owns it, and then they give a price quote to someone who's driving through and says, I need to sell my car. This is the future of the way that inventory will be acquired. But if you do all of that work to acquire the inventory and then don't title it correctly, you're going to spend all this money in the back end and ruin that efficiency and ruin that cost optimization and that profit optimization. So the big future for vehicles is, how do you acquire the right inventory quickly? And in order to do that efficiently and at maximum profit, titling is a big part of it. It just doesn't look like it because, again, there's no title line item on any profit and loss sheet that a dealer principal sees.
Well, that's a neat concept that I don't think that anybody's ever brought up before. If you could have some type of an arch, put it outside of a car wash where they might wash 400 cars on a day, and you just give the people the option, because they all have an app to get into the car wash. It says, would you like an offer on your car today? Interested in trading? Click. And then how much would the dealers pay for those leads? And, they would definitely pay for the arch outside of the car wash.
That's right.
Or you probably couldn't put it at a big brand name coffee shop, but you could definitely put it at a mom and pop coffee shop. Well, how many people drive through the drive-through to get coffee?
Well, imagine if you did that and then you had this great customer experience and a customer wanted to sell you their car and you were excited to buy it. And then your answer was, well, here, I'm just going to have to FedEx you a bunch of forms. You're going to have to sign a bunch of things. Do it correctly without anyone around to tutor you. You're going to have to drop it back off in a FedEx and get it back to me. Well, no one's going to want to do that, right?
Yeah.
What they want is a digital-first experience, and they want to know that all of that can be done from their phone. Well, now a dealer can do that, but they simply have to embrace a new way to do titling, a new way to transfer ownership. And that transfer of ownership was never a core operational expertise of any dealership. It didn't need to be when all the buying and selling was hyper-local. Now that it's not, well, now you have to start thinking about, how do I change the operational side of my dealership to match the innovation on my sales side of the dealership?
Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcox Media.
Let's talk about KPIs. What KPIs can a dealer expect to see improve if they are embracing this digital titling?
Well, the first thing is that the revenue per vehicle will go up. That vehicle will sit in inventory a shorter period of time, so less depreciation per day, and you'll see profit go up too. So less cost, because you're not floor planning that vehicle for as long as you would have otherwise been. All of that is because you're transferring the ownership of the vehicle faster. The other thing that you really see is that the customer satisfaction goes up. Consumers have indicated very clearly that they want to lead with some sort of digital inventory seeking, right? They want to go online, they want to see what's available, they want to build a car. The dealer still has a massive role to play, and will, for I think at least the totality of my lifetime, have a role to play in making sure that that inventory meets their consumers where they want to be met. Well, how are you going to do that as a dealer? Well, clearly you go and innovate the way you're acquiring inventory. You look at what's being built online or what people are seeking online, and then you go find that inventory because you know your customers best as the dealer. Well, if you're going to do that, it's all going to be digital. It's going to be, okay, I'm going to find this car. It's 5 states away or 10 states away. I'm going to get it either shipped to me or shipped to the consumer. the consumer then doesn't want to have to fill out a bunch of paperwork and do things in the physical realm. They want to have a digital experience. And you as a dealer want to match that digital experience by keeping them inside of your digital world, either your app, your website, your DMS experience. And so the only way to do that is to keep all of the paperwork and documentation digital. Well, if there was a blessing to COVID, it's that much of that digital enhancement that needed to come into the vehicle world has now arrived. Mm-hmm. There are solutions for nearly every bit of the documentation process to go digital. The last piece that couldn't was titling, until the National Digital Titling Clearinghouse was rolled out by the state of West Virginia and available in all 50 states for dealers to be able to put the inventory into their name, control that entire process digitally, and then when they sell the car, they know how to sell cars all around the country. Dealers know exactly how to sell cars. It's the acquisition of the cars that's changing right now. And so that the KPI you see the most is the customer satisfaction scores go way up as the customer says, wow, the dealer met me where I wanted to be met, which was in the digital realm.
We've talked a lot about mega dealers or big dealer groups or dealers that might acquire inventory and store it off-site and then sell it without it ever coming to the dealership. But what about a smaller dealership or a smaller dealer group? Is this something that every dealer in the United States can benefit from?
The thing that I love about digital technologies and building a company that is trying to bring as much digital first solutions to the vehicle world is that it no longer matters how big you are. You could have a one rooftop store and give the online appearance that any of the mega dealers could. It's up to you how much you want to invest in your online presence. But you have to match that online presence and that sexy website with the innovation on how you acquire the inventory so that you can meet your customer the way that the mega dealers can. Mm-hmm. So the way to do that is innovate your buying practices, have buying centers, figure out the new sources of inventory from consumers directly or different types of auctions, have maybe that scanning machine somewhere and acquire that inventory that way. But at the end of the day, when you're acquiring that inventory, if you want to have a digital process so that your consumer feels like your one rooftop store is the same as a 200 rooftop enterprise, well, then make sure the whole process is digital. And as more and more states are pushing for your digital identity to be in your phone, your ID card to be in your phone, your title and registration are following very quickly. We've rolled out this technology in states. There are consumers around the country that are now sitting on digital registrations and able to sit on digital titles that they didn't have that even 5 years ago. And so we know it's coming, and dealers have to know it's coming, and they have to react accordingly because that's what consumers are demanding. So that small one rooftop place can give the optics, appearance, and most importantly, the experience that the largest of large dealers can give. And that is a field leveler that we haven't seen in a long time.
Wow. Well, what's coming next? Let's talk a little bit about what's coming next. I mean, as far as remarketing vehicles, sourcing vehicles, what do you see coming down the line?
I see the velocity of vehicle transactions improving. So if we look at vehicle sales, we see that, okay, this year doesn't look to be as strong as maybe some of the past few years. Well, why is that? Well, traditionally it's linked to, the economy isn't as strong or interest rates are higher, normal reasons.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. We're going to have those cycles, and that's part of living in any economy. Mm-hmm. So what do you do as a dealer? Well, you try to increase the velocity or the turnover of your inventory. You try to improve the set of things you're offering to your customers to buy. Well, if titling becomes easier and the whole process is digital and consumers are storing it in their phone and they're able to one button click and say, okay, I'm going to sell this vehicle, this trailer, this boat, this pontoon boat, this ATV. I'm going to take whatever I have in the vehicle world in my garage and sell it and make it easier. What we see is that in every state we roll out this technology, the velocity of transactions increases. So dealers aren't having to change the amount of inventory they have on any given day, but they are seeing a higher velocity of transactions, which means higher profit. All of that is because it's digitally led. You brought up Netflix before. as we were talking before the interview. And one thing I think about is my willingness to absorb 4 or 5 different pieces of content on Netflix at any one time is totally different than the way I used to just go to Blockbuster and rent a video, and I'd have one movie that I'd watch at one time. Now I might be simultaneously watching a show, a series, a movie, and just bouncing between them depending on my mood. Well, consumers are no different. If you make the sale of and the acquisition of a vehicle of any type easier, they will change the velocity and the frequency with which they deal with that vehicle. So that's what digital titling does, and that's what's changing in the vehicle world, is that it used to be hard to buy something and sell something. You make it easier to do that, people will do it at a higher, more frequent rate.
So, so what you're saying is that the overall number of transactions in a state goes up. We're not talking about an individual dealer here. We're talking about the market as a whole in an area where if we make it easier for customers to do business, they're going to do more business. And so we're going to see, like maybe the average person kept their car for 4 years, and now the average person might keep it for 3.5 years. I mean, I'm shooting from the hip with those numbers, but is that what we're talking about?
You're directionally accurate. And what we see is that the smartest dealerships are seeing that and then responding with the types of services that those consumers who are higher velocity transaction consumers want. They want to have either shorter terms of ownership. They want to flip a car faster, take it off lease, get something else. They want to transition between vehicles because it's easier. The friction isn't there. And so the willingness to pay a little bit more in order to have that new vehicle you see is higher if the friction is lower. And so, why do people say, I don't want to, I'm not going to go buy a new car, it's such a pain. Well, if you make it easy and people say, it's actually really easy to just get in and get out of a car, well, all of a sudden, you're going to see higher velocity of transactions in the state. That's what we're seeing. When the digital technology meets the consumer says, I'll trade and move in and out of vehicles more quickly. So the really smart dealers are looking at their states and telling their states, we want this technology because they know it'll drive profit at their dealership and it'll drive a better customer experience. It's what the consumers want.
Well, Shane, we've talked all around how the industry works and a lot of the parts. Let's talk about the auction.
Sure.
How does this affect auctions?
Yeah, so, auctions are, what a fun experience. I don't know if you've ever been to one recently, they're really interesting when they're in person. And I think it's even more interesting now that it's happening online and you see the way that experience is changing for dealers as they acquire inventory from auctions. Well, the reality of the auction is that a lot of times that paper title is something that, as the dealer who's trying to auction a car, you have to make sure that title's in good form. Otherwise, the transaction will get kicked back, and that's a very expensive proposition for you, fees to everybody. And as the acquiring dealer at the auction, you want to make sure that the title you're receiving is a good title so that when you get that car, you don't have any problems and you can sell it right away. Because remember, the whole reason you're going to auction is to try to find the inventory that your buyers are looking for.
Yeah.
So if you're specifically going to one of these auctions to find specific inventory that your consumers want, the last thing you want is to slow down the velocity of that transaction by having a paperwork issue. Yeah. Well, now with digital titling, it's so easy for auction owners and the entities that run them to be able to offer the service to their dealers to say, okay, when you present this vehicle to our auction, simply make sure that this is the standard for the title, right? Use the National Digital Titling Clearinghouse to get this title into the appropriate name. And then when you're buying it as a dealer, how do you make sure you get it into your name so that you can easily sell it? Same thing, you use the National Digital Titling Clearinghouse. This is why the state of West Virginia launched this for the country. Auctions are probably the last frontier of entities that are now starting to figure out how to use it and how to really change that auction experience so that paperwork issues go away for everybody. And there's definitely some change in the physical auctions that needs to occur in order for them to adopt this digital, again, non-paper solution. The digital auctions are certainly leading the way with understanding how to embrace that inside of their process. But both types of auctions, physical and digital, are really bringing that in. And we're seeing that change, again, the pace and comfort that dealers have with presenting inventory to an auction or buying inventory from an auction.
Interesting. Well, is there anything more you'd like to share with our audience today?
Again, we love being here. Bringing this digital transformation into automotive retail is so exciting for us at Champ. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And again, I don't think there's ever a child that says, oh, I really want to be in digital titling when I wake up, or when I grow up, rather. But the reality is that it's fun to bring these types of solutions to industries you love, and we love doing this, and we love the auto dealer community, and we're excited to try to be a part of the next wave of innovation in this space.
Well, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to join us for this AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, our guest has been Shane Bigelow from Champ Titles. We hope to see you again on a future episode. This one's Over the Curb and Burning Gas.